Hello everyone, my name is Luke Anderson and I'm the product manager here at Midwest. Welcome to our webinar for the Sawgrass Virtuoso Die Sublimation Printers. Our presenter today is Jimmy Lamb of Sawgrass Technologies. He has over 25 years of experience in the apparel decoration business and he's got a great presentation for you. He's going to be covering all the great features of this desktop decorating system, from its hardware, the ink, and the incredibly user-friendly software that all comes included when you purchase a Virtuoso printer. This presentation will be recorded and posted on Midwest's website, so if you'd like to review this webinar again at another time, it will be available to do so. We'll also have a time at the end for a quick Q&A, so if you have any questions, please save them for the end of the presentation. If you come up with any other questions after the presentation, you can reach out to Midwest by any means, and we will be happy to answer them for you. So, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today to learn about how dye sublimation can improve your business and how truly versatile and profitable it can be. So, Jimmy, if you're all ready, I think we're set.
Okay, great, Luke. Pleasure to be here, and let's get rolling. So today we're talking about Virtuoso, the HD sublimation solution. HD is in high definition. The system we'll be talking about, the Virtuoso system, is a fully integrated HD product decorating system that was developed by Sawgrass. It consists of the SG400 and SG800 inkjet printers, the Sublimation HD sublimation inks, and the Creative Studio online designer and software. Now, we're going to get to that in just a minute. But before we actually talk about that system, I want to talk about some of the great things you'll be able to do with it. And then we're going to come back and talk about what the actual components are. So if you're looking at sublimation, if you're new to sublimation, you may not be sure what sublimation is. We're going to explain that to you. First of all, I want you to understand that sublimation will expand your reach. So if you're already in business doing anything, whether it's signs or embroidery or screen printing or whatnot, by bringing in sublimation, it's going to give you the ability to do a lot of diversification. Now, everything you see on the screen right here was done with sublimation. In fact, everything there was done with the exact same sublimation printer and the same heat press, with the exception of the one item here, the water bottle, which is rounded, and that would have been done using a mug press, which does rounded items, or potentially what we call a mug wrap, either way. But with that said, everything on that screen was done with the same sublimation system. As you can see, wide variety of products there. If that was your customer, the Brighton Tigers, by having this one system, this one sublimation system, you can do a wide variety of products, which means more opportunity for you and more satisfaction for the customer. So why don't you keep that in your mind as we go. I started as an embroiderer, and as an embroiderer, we had a very limited number of things we could do for a given client. But being able to go into something digital like sublimation, it opened the doors to be able to bring in more money with every single order. Now, what exactly is sublimation? Sublimation is a digital printing process that works at a molecular level. Wow, that's a big sentence there. What that means is we're using a bonding process that deals with molecules bonding rather than an adhesive process. And in fact, with a lot of digital inks typically have what's called a binder added, which is a chemical additive, which is essentially an adhesive that makes sure that the actual ink will adhere to the surface of what's being decorated. And typically those are activated with heat. So if you look at, for example, screen printing, it does have a binder in the inks, and then we put it in a dryer and it binds it to the surface of the item. If you're looking at direct-to-garment printing, same concept. Binder in the ink, and then we're using a heat press typically afterwards to activate those binders. But sublimation does not have a binder. It actually involves molecular bonding to make the ink itself bond with the actual products that we're decorating. Now, keeping in mind it is molecular, that means that there are probably going to be certain things it will not bond to. Put a better way, there's only certain things that it will bond to, and sublimation will only bond to polymers and polyesters. It does not bond to things like cotton, for example. Okay, but it's kind of the same too with other inks. When you look at other inks with binders, those binders only bind to certain surfaces as well. The other thing neat about sublimation is it does bond at a subsurface level, not on top like most things, but rather it actually bonds internally into the polymers and polyesters that's being applied to, which gives it a very, very permanent type of adhesion that will give you high-resolution color and detail, and it won't peel or crack. Or in the case of being laundered, it will not fade when laundered. It makes it very unique that way. Now, the way that we apply it is we're going to use a digital printer equipped with the sublimation die, and it's truly a die. There is a difference between dye and ink, but we're just going to call it all ink to make it simple here, okay? We're going to take the sublimation die, apply it onto sublimation transfer paper using an inkjet printer. We'll be talking about those printers, the Virtuoso printers, as we go. And then we're going to take that piece of transfer paper that's been decorated. We're going to go to a heat press. We're going to combine it with the item that we're going to decorate, and it must be either polyester or have a polymer coating. We're going to put the two in the heat press, close the heat press up. Most items at 400 degrees for 1 minute with a medium pressure. During that process, two very unique things happen. Number one, the sublimation dye that's on that paper turns into a gas and starts to leave that paper, because the paper is temporary. It's not going to actually bond to anything. The paper is just carrying the ink over to the surface. Okay, so that gas, the ink turns into a gas, number one. The second thing is with polymers and polyesters, they're basically composed of, the easiest way to describe it is microfibers or microcells that look maybe like little clamshells. And they open up when we're applying the heat to it such that the sublimation dye penetrates inside. And then when we remove the heat, basically open up the heat press, the microcells close back up and they permanently bond with that sublimation dye. So it's a very unique process in the way that it works. And oh, by the way, we take that paper and we throw it away. It's discarded, never used again, okay? There you go. Kind of a long technical explanation, but that's what sublimation is. For your purposes, it's a digital printing process that produces a high-resolution permanent coloration that won't peel or crack or fade when laundered. I will tell you it's not UV resistant, so in direct sunlight, sublimation will fade over time. You know, it's a very simple process. The setup is quick. You can produce, I say millions of colors. I'm going to be honest with you, probably about 650,000 colors. So just a little bit under the millions, okay? Very low production cost, easy math. Sublimation ink is about a penny per square inch when applied. The reality is it's less, but that's easy math. No special skills required, no color separations needed. If you happen to be a screen printer, you know all about color separations. And it makes for a very good short-run production solution so that we can do small items, small runs whenever we need to. Something, again, if you're a screen printer, it doesn't work out very well for you. With sublimation, no problem, okay? Plus, we can turn it pretty darn quick because we can set it up so fast. Now, as I mentioned, it only bonds with polymers. And sometimes it makes people nervous. They're like, polymers? Gee, what kind of products are polymers? Well, it's not about polymer products. It's about polymer-coated products. And in the world of sublimation, there's close to 1,000 different blank items. We call them substrates that have been manufactured with a polymer coating specifically for sublimation. Here's just a few of them there on the screen. Now, if you look at their base material, it's not polyester or polymer at all. This particular plaque here with the Harley-Davidson is actually acrylic that has that coating on it. This particular bowl for Spike is a ceramic, and it has a coating applied to it. The flask over here is metal. The plaque here is wood. And that's what they are. Those what those products are. They just have that coating applied. Now, if you've never touched a blank sublimation product, and we're talking about coatings, you might think, hey, if I rub my fingers on it, is it going to feel kind of rubbery or plasticky on the surface? Does that metal really feel like metal? Yes, it really feels like metal. You really can't tell that you have that polymer coating on there. The coating is there, but it doesn't change the texture or the feel of those particular products. So definitely the product has to either have a coating or it has to be a natural polymer-based product or polyester product. Neat thing about sublimation is that it's HD, especially the new generation of ink, high def. And that means that when we put a photograph on something, we can truly reproduce top-level photography and artwork at a very high level of print, something most other systems cannot do. Now, depending on what you're doing already, you may be saying, photographs, it's not really my thing. But let me tell you something. When you add a photograph into anything, whether it be a promotional product, a personalized product, an award product, a signage product, when you add a photograph, you're telling a story. And it does not cost you anything with sublimation to add a photograph. It really doesn't. But it enhances the perceived value. And if you have a higher perceived value, then you can charge a higher price and get a greater margin. And those are some of the tricks. I mean, something you learn after being in this industry for 25 years, that the key in the pricing is to be able to raise the perceived value to the highest level that a customer may be willing to pay while keeping your costs down, okay? And that's something Sublimation does quite well. And especially if you haven't really thought about photography and what you do, it's amazing how much it can enhance something that once you have the ability to actually do it. Now, talking about apparel, Sublimation only bonds with polyester. So it's not going to work with cotton t-shirts. Now, a lot of times people are like, ew, they don't like polyester, okay? If you look at old school polyester, it's hot, stretchy, sticky to wear. Just didn't work for a lot of people. But we find now that the younger generation is very much into poly products, because most of the poly products are actually what we call poly performance. Poly performance means it has moisture wicking capability. So it's actually much more comfortable to wear when it's hot or even when it's cold because of those cells that do the moisture wicking. And we can thank a company called Under Armour for really making it mainstream. And plenty of other people make poly performance products as well, but Under Armour is what really got it out there. And we've also seen new developments in the world of textiles, such that we have polyester products that look and feel like cotton. It's called spun polyester. So for those clients of yours that really like the look and feel of cotton, you can sell it to them and sublimate it. It's just called spun polyester instead of 100% cotton. And it actually does a much better job with moisture wicking than cotton does. So it's actually more comfortable to wear, okay? So yes, we can do apparel decoration, but we cannot do every form of apparel out there, every form of garment out there. So bottom line, Sublimation opens the doors to a wide range of products and applications and markets. Everything you see there on the screen has been sublimated, okay? So that's just such a small little teaser amount of everything we can do with sublimation. It's really cool, all the stuff we can do. Really pretty exciting when you get into it, okay? So that's sort of a brief introduction to what sublimation is and maybe what you can do with it. So let's talk about the systems that are available to you that you can purchase from Midwest that will allow you to actually do sublimation on your own. And the system we're going to be talking about is Virtuoso. And Virtuoso is the latest generation of sublimation systems that have been developed by Sawgrass. Now, I'm actually going to compare them to the earlier generation. If you're already doing sublimation, you may have an earlier generation. You may have one of the Ricoh printers, or you may have an Epson printer as well. But I want to do is really focus on Virtuoso and kind of show you how it's developed over the last generation, because we're a development company at Sawgrass, and we're always looking at improving and developing, new products, and always improving the process, getting better resolutions, better colorizations, all those types of things. So this is our latest generation, okay? So as I was saying there in the very beginning, Virtuoso is a fully integrated HD product decorating system that we developed. And it has two main printers that we're going to talk about today, the SG400 and the SG800. Both are desktop inkjet printers. It also has the new generation of Sublimation HD sublimation ink. And finally has Creative Studio, which I'll give you a quick demo on too, which is an amazing piece of software which is absolutely free when you buy a printer. Okay, it's a really great program to help you set things up. You'll see it live in just a minute. When you buy a Virtuoso printer, it comes with no additional charge. Okay. All right, so the Virtuoso SG400 and SG800 are really the only desktop printers built for digital decorating. I will tell you, up until now, at Sawgrass, what we've done is we will take a look at a desktop printer and say, would that work with our ink? And then we're going to actually work our ink to fit the printer, okay? So that means that we can't always do everything we want with the ink, because we have to create the ink for that printer. This isn't like you have one big giant vat of ink and it works with every printer. It does not. You do have to make different formulations for different printers, okay? But in this newest generation, the Virtuoso, we work directly with a printer manufacturer, Ricoh, to create a printer from the ground up designed specifically for sublimation. And that's why it's really the only desktop printer built specifically for digital decoration, in this case, sublimation, okay? We can get up to 1200 by 1200 DPI output for some really, really good quality HD production. We're getting faster throughput with these printers, meaning we can print faster than ever before, so that means we're more productive because we can get more pieces per hour out the door. Now, if we take a look at our past ink versus our latest ink, We've always had good ink, but we keep trying to make it a little better. The one on the right is the new Sublimation HD compared to the Sublimation R, which is a previous generation on the left. And you can see that the red is a little more brilliant. Now, the Sublimation R is great ink. Don't get that wrong. But we are trying to take things to a higher level, and that's exactly what we've done, because in this case, with these particular printers, we were able to work directly with the printer manufacturer such that we were able to take advantage of their capabilities, and they were able to take advantage of our capabilities. So our ink was definitely engineered for this. Now, because of that, we're getting a higher yield, which means lower imaging cost. If we can get more ink out and cover the area with maybe using less ink because of a formulation, that's actually going to lower your imaging cost. We've expanded our gamut. Gamut is the range of color. You'll see more about that in just a minute. Something we always talk about with digital printing, and it's going to give us more vibrant, more accurate colors than ever before. And then there's the Creative Studio, the designer, which we'll look at specifically all by itself in just a few minutes, okay? Creative Studio is a sublimation graphic design program. And the reason that we did this was we found a lot of people were starting out with Coreldraw, Photoshop, Illustrator, and they were overwhelmed by all the buttons on there and all the different functions and intimidated even. And this was actually slowing people down from being able to get comfortable with sublimation because they were overwhelmed by their software. Now, I know some of you out there have been using it for years and no problem. And by the way, all those software programs work with these printers, okay? But for those who are looking for something a little different that's more sublimation friendly, Creative Studio is what was produced for filling that need. Now, in Creative Studio, when we're taking a look at what people were doing in Coreldraw and Photoshop, we found that the average person was using about 20% of the functionality and struggling with that. So we said, do you really need all that extra functionality just to be able to set up and produce things for sublimation? Well, maybe not. So we greatly simplified the number of functions and tools to focus strictly on sublimation production. Some of you will love it. Some of you may feel like it's not the right thing for you. That's okay. I mean, it's included at no charge. And if you choose not to use it, you don't have to. If you want to use it and use traditional programs, you can do that as well. That all works with these printers, okay? Now, this also happens to be an online program. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. But one of the reasons we put it online is as we make updates, it just automatically happens to it. The other is we wanted you to be able to use virtually any device that can connect to the internet to be able to, connect into Creative Studio and do design work. So that's another reason that we did that. So it's all created online, then it's downloaded and printed out to your printer. And this also includes stock designs at no charge, and in addition has color management printer drivers that are built specifically for these printers to interface with these graphics. So let's talk specifically about the Virtuoso printers, because if you want to do sublimation, you're going to have to get the printer, okay? You cannot just use any printer off the street. You really do have to use printers that have inks that have been manufactured for them. So again, the SG400 and SG800 are the two that we're talking about, and they're based on Ricoh. Some of you might be familiar with Ricoh, maybe some of you are not, but these were actually created in a joint effort between us and Ricoh. We took some of the great features of Ricoh, like auto maintenance, which means if you leave the printer plugged in and turned on, it will do periodic head checks and head cleanings so that your inks do not dry out in the heads. And that's very important because you hear a lot of stories about inks drying out and clogging heads, but the auto maintenance feature does take care of that in these particular printers. Ideally, if you're printing all the time, it's not even an issue, but if you go through stretches where you're not, auto maintenance will take care of you for that. We also looked at things like things you never worry about. You don't worry too much about algorithms and optimized head jetting pressures and whatever, but yeah, that's all going on behind the scenes. And the key with this is when we create images, we're creating it by using ink converted into little droplets, and then how well those are placed how well we place those determines on just how accurate our images are and how great our colors are and how much detail we can do. So anytime that we can improve the creation of the dot and the placement of the dot, we're going to get better graphics. That's what we're trying to say here in the long term. Now, the combination of these printers and the ink, some of the benefits that we're seeing, just a comparison, okay? So this is previous generation is Ricoh, current generation is the SG printers. With the Ricoh printers, we could get up to 600 by 600 DPI, which is about 547,000 colors. That makes for a pretty big color chart, you know. With the SG printers, we can do our standard printing at 600 by 600 DPI, but we're getting 646,000 colors. And then if you go to the 1200 by 1200 DPI mode, you're getting up to 687,000 colors. So we're really getting about 25% more colors with these printers. And that's important because we can do photography, and photography is very, very color sensitive. We're getting better blues and reds. Reds have always been a little tricky with digital printing. We're seeing reduced wear on the heads, and that's making everything more environmentally friendly than on that previous generation of printer. And we're getting greater efficiency. With the SG400, we're getting about 11% greater efficiency on our ink. With the 800, about a 25% greater efficiency. And we'll look a little closer at that too as we go. Now let's look down at the individual printers. I was talking about printers in general up to this point, but let's start with the 400 because ultimately you're going to buy a printer. And your two best choices right now are the SG400 or the SG800. So let's take a closer look. Now the 400 evolved from the Ricoh 3110. Great startup platform, has a really good price point, and Luke can tell you more about the pricing. Okay, works with multiple operating systems, so we can work with PC, we can work with Mac, and if you're using the Creative Studio aspect, you can work with, you know, iOS, Mac, PC, Android, Windows phones. I mean, everything you can imagine. Okay, if you're looking at that little image over there, the Surf's Up image provided to us by Great Dane Graphics. We use that as our test image. We normally print it as an 8-inch by 10-inch test image. Okay, so that's when you see numbers here. They're applying to printing out that particular image. The estimated ink cost was 60 cents for that particular image. So 60 cents, not too bad to be able to do that full color as an 8-inch by 10-inch. Now remember, I told you a penny per square inch. That's easy math. If you did a penny per square inch, that would have been 80 cents. In reality, it's 60 cents. Okay. The maximum media size or maximum paper size that we can use on the 400 is 8.5 by 14. Believe it or not, it could do up to an 8.5 by 51 inch with an optional bypass tray, but nobody makes paper that size. Just saying. Okay, so 8.5 by 14 is what pretty much is your maximum paper size. If you're running in the high-speed mode, that particular image right there, in that size, you could do 156 prints per hour at 600 by 600 DPI. If you switch to the high quality mode, you can do 72 prints at 600 DPI. And if you go to the advanced photo, you're only going to get 22 prints per hour, but at 1200 by 1200 DPI. Pretty amazing. Okay, so those are some of the specs that we're getting out of that SG400. Usually when you're shopping for a printer for sublimation, the biggest focus though is on size. What can I do with this? As I said, the largest sheet of paper is 8.5 by 14 that you can run through it. So what can I do with 8.5 by 14? I could probably get 6 iPhone covers on one sheet of paper or 6 coasters on one sheet of paper. If I'm doing apparel, I have a pretty small window of what I can do, either vertically or horizontally, but I could do some stuff, okay, on apparel, maybe not everything. So that's what I'm going to get with 8.5 by 14. Also, I want you to understand that that's maximum paper size. It does not print to the edge of the paper. So your maximum image size is probably in the neighborhood of 7.5 by 13 because you can get to about 1/2 inch of the edge of the paper in all 4 directions. If we compare it, and so I know some of you may have an existing and you're always interested in saying, what do I get with this newer printer? But if you make a direct comparison, remember, the 400 evolved from the Ricoh 3110, which is a very proven printer. Both of them had maximum media size, standard media size, 8.5 by 14. The 400, SG400, actually has that bypass tray at 8.5 by 51 that it could do, okay? But nobody's making that right now. Just saying, it's an option, right? But you can definitely see a big differences on the output speed. 156 prints per hour maximum speed on the 400 versus 82 on the previous generation. Image cost went down as well, but you know what? The MSRP did not. Now what you'll pay for any of this, you're buying it from Midwest, you're not buying it from us. Whatever kind of package Midwest has to offer, they can give you in detail, and that would be, of course, whatever your price tag is. Now let's compare it real quick to the 800, which is my favorite. The 800 is bigger. Okay, and I like the versatility of a larger printer because that means I can do bigger products. I can do bigger images on apparel. I can do larger hard products like signage and whatnot, so I like the 800. It evolved from the Ricoh 7100, which again, proven printer platform. Everything, it runs on pretty much every system out there that you need to run. Now here, look at the difference in ink cost. We're talking that same image, same size parameters is 35 cents, whereas when we looked at the SG400 just a minute ago, it was 60 cents. So the ink is cheaper. The ink itself is not cheaper. It has to do with the yield of how the ink is processed. In other words, I'm using less ink to be able to cover that area. Okay. Combination of chemistry and print heads. Maximum standard media size is 11 by 17, but if you get the optional bypass tray, you could do 13 by 51. Again, nobody makes 51-inch paper. However, people do make 13 by 19 paper. So if you go to that bypass tray, which is an option, you can do sheets of up to 13 by 19 right off the shelf, okay, because it's already being manufactured. The speed and output, 156 prints per hour at the high speed, 72 at the high quality, 22 at the advanced photo, okay, using that image that you see over here. But here's that real difference when we compare it back to the 400. You can see that I can actually place double. I could do 6 of those iPhone covers. On the 400, I'm doing a dozen here. Same thing with the coasters, double the output. But here's what I really like. Look at that large area. And this is just on the 11 by 17 paper. If you're using 13 by 19, you can get even more area. When you do a lot of apparel work, big is better. It really is. And that's something you have to take into consideration. Totally up to you of what you need to buy. You need to figure that out. This machine does have a higher price point, okay? But you look at the benefits you're getting out of it, it's just something to consider. If we compare the SG800 to the previous generation 7100, you can see that the paper sizes were the same on the standard paper. With the bypass tray, you can do up to 13 by 51 if one ever makes it, but definitely 13 by 19. But the speed is the real difference here, 156 prints per hour versus 69 max. Okay, that's over double. And the cost went down as well, 35 cents for that image, the one that we saw, Surf's Up versus 46. And you can see the price really pretty much stayed the same, okay? So we gave you a lot of new features, a better quality, a software program and everything, but we've kept the price pretty much the same. All right, one last thing here, and then I'm going to show you how the Creative Studio works, but I want you to understand how everything kind of sets up. If you're going to print, when you're buying a printer, you're buying a printer, okay? But you have to have some type of printer driver to run the printer. Now, if you're using a PC, okay, if you're using a PC, you have two options. You can use a Creative Studio to create all of your images and then send them to the printer, or you can use traditional programs like Illustrator, Photoshop, Coreldraw to send them to your printer. You can do both. You can set up for both. The key elements that you have to get in place are your drivers, and these both come from Sawgrass, and they're included at no charge, okay? If you buy Creative Studio, you're working in the cloud, then you download it to the Creative Studio Print and Color Manager, and then it shoots over to your printer, okay? So it's a free download. You download it and install it. If you're working with these programs, a lot of these are going to cloud-based now, but a lot of them are still desktop too. You would install what's called Power Driver, and this is for a PC user. And then you would create your image, and you would send it to Power Driver, which would apply color management, and then it would go over to the printer. And these can coexist. They do not talk to each other, but they can coexist on the same printer, okay, or the same computer. If you're a Mac user, it's almost the same, slightly different. With a Mac user, again, with Creative Studio, you're in the cloud. You send it to the Creative Studio Print and Color Manager for Mac, and then over to the printer. If you're working with these programs, you're going to install what's called a Mac profile for color management and a printer driver. And so you would send it down to that and send it over to here. Your Power Driver is just for PC, okay? All right, so this brings up the last slide where I just put my name and my contact real quick, but I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to jump online, and I'm going to play with Creative Studio just for a minute to kind of demo it for you, and then we're going to go into questions and answers, okay? All right, so give me 1 second here while I switch over. The screen may go dark for just a minute, and I'm just going to switch over to internet mode, and I'll be right back with the screen here. Let's get this out of the way, and here we are, okay? So you should be back seeing, I don't know which screen you're seeing, that's kind of the scary thing, but you should be seeing right now a screen where it says Creative Studio in the top left corner, and it has some control buttons right across here, and let's just double check we are looking at screen 2. Yes, we are. So we should be good there.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. What I have done is I have a coaster on the screen, and when you're working with Creative Studio, well, Creative Studio, the concept is choose the product, then create the artwork for the product. when you're using a graphics program, it's called create the image, then try to make it fit the product, okay? And what we've done with Creative Studio is we've loaded real products into it, not just generic products. This is a very specific blank coaster that I have on the screen. And I got it out of my product list. So if you go to the product list, you can see that we have a drop down here that has all these different products, and we keep adding more, by the way. But I went and pulled a coaster out, and here's where it was on the coasters. And you can see these are all the different ones in here. And these are real ones from a manufacturer called Unisub. And I happen to choose the round coaster here, and it brought it onto the screen. Okay. Now, when we're working with sublimation, we have what we call a bleed area. And, you know, most of our products, we do what we call a full bleed, which means going from edge to edge. But if we're doing a full bleed, we normally make the image slightly larger than the product. And the reason that we do that is when we go to mate the product to the paper, if the image is slightly larger, it means you can see the edges of it when you're mating the two together. A lot easier to work with. And we went ahead and built the bleed areas in. The white area on this represents the exact dimensions of this coaster. Whereas this little gray area is where we're saying run your artwork all the way out to the outer edge, okay? Because that way when it prints, it'll print all the way to the outer edge, but the only thing that ends up on the coaster is what's in the white area. So I'm going to put a piece of artwork on here real quick. We included images, stock images. We also included templates, art templates. And an art template usually is made up of multiple pieces of a graphic, okay? And we have lots of different categories here, and we keep adding more, which is included with your system. And I'm going to use travel and heritage. And I apologize, it may be a little slow because I'm using the same computer to do online graphics as I'm using to drive the webinar, which means a lot of bandwidth, okay? But I'm going to go choose one here. I'm going to choose the United States of America, which, by the way, notice this logo is square. I'm going to put it on a round coaster, okay? Well, that seems like it could take a lot of extra work in setting something up. So just bear with me. Like I said, I'm using a lot of bandwidth here, which is slowing it down. Normally, it goes a whole lot faster. Okay. It brought it onto the screen, and you can see it's already cropped off the edges there because anything that's outside that outer boundary gets cropped off, which just made things a little easier. But you can also see it doesn't quite fit there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a selection of this whole design, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Now I can click and drag from here, or I can use my little buttons over here, and we're going to make this a little larger. It's a really big file, but it moved pretty quick. So now I have my artwork going all the way out to those different edges there, and it should work pretty well for me. Now some of our templates, like this one, the words New York, you can actually select New York and move it around. So some of our templates we can rearrange the different pieces in here to make everything fit. But I wanted you to see that was just a good clear view that we can see that bleed zone in here. So when I get ready to go to print this thing right now, if I was to go to print it, it's going to have the exactly correct dimensions for this product. Okay, that's the beauty of that, right? All right, so let's just clear that out. I want to build another product from scratch real quick. And I'm going to go and do a license plate. So I'm going to go up here, look under license plates, and under license plates, there we go. I'm going to choose this license plate here. It's a real license plate. I'm going to put it on the front, and I'm just choosing what size paper I'm going to use. I have this size paper, so here is that license plate. So maybe this time I'm just going to use an image instead of a template. A template is multiple pieces joined together, whereas an image is usually just a straight flat image. So maybe this is for a school, for the booster club to sell or something. So I'm going to go down and look and see what I got here. By the way, all these stock designs are included with this at no charge. We're going to go with, I'm going to use the bears. I don't like the colors. I'm not saying anything. I'm just randomly choosing here. I went with the bull just because I like the red. Okay, there's a bright red there. Okay, because it like kind of stands out. So I'm going to choose it, and you see it brings it onto the license plate template, and then I can just adjust it down to fit however I want to fit. If I want to add text to it, I can certainly add text to it. And there I have, a starting point is I have the bull and the license plate. Now, just a little tip here real quick. The neat thing about sublimation is most of our products, like a license plate, we can print it from edge to edge. How do we add value? Having a nice background makes that more interesting. See, that's a white background. It's kind of boring, right? So what I'm going to do here is make it a little more interesting. I'm going to go back into my images, and I'm going to choose a background to apply to it. And I'm going to go into photo textures. Remember, this is a license plate. That particular license plate, you can get license plates in aluminum, or you can get them in a plastic. But I'm going to make it look like maybe it's stainless steel, because I'm going to choose this thing here called metal. And when it comes in, it builds things in layers. So it just put that on top of my bull, okay? But that's okay, my bull is still there. So the first thing I'm going to do is make this actually fit the area. So I'm just grabbing the corners and dragging it. And now, all of a sudden, when I'm looking at this license plate, it looks like it's one of those stainless steel type of license plates, right? Okay, I still can't see my bull. That's because of the layering function. So I'm just going to change the layering right here, and I brought the bull forth. Now, that to me looks a lot more interesting than that blank white background. And because of that, making it look more interesting, just that easy, I've just added value to this, which means that I can get a higher price point most likely for it. So there's lots of different ways to do all of that. Totally up to you. I'm not going to go through everything that we can do with Creative Studio, but you're getting kind of the gist of what we can do here. Very easy to set things up. If you want to put your own images into it, you can do that, where you go to click on images, and you see it says upload, and you can upload. And anything you upload appears over here in the category. It's called My Images. Anything that's in here are the standard stock designs. We do add more stock designs routinely, almost nightly. We add more products in. We add more templates in. So Creative Studio, completely free when you're buying your Virtuoso printer. It's up to you whether you choose to use it or not. Great system. I'll leave it at that. So with that said, I'm ready to switch over to question and answer. I wanted to give you what I thought was a brief overview, that a little long-winded, but definitely if you have questions, we'll go ahead and switch over to that mode and take some of the questions that you have. And I can see that you've been asking questions. So Luke, if you want to join us back in, I know you have some live people there, and I will take some questions here. You can take questions there, and we'll just kind of work through them. First question, can you let us know how the Virtuoso 25-inch fits into Sawgrass line? Yes, I didn't actually mention that one, but we do have one. It's the VJ628 printer, which is a 25-inch wide roll feed. The SG printers are sheet fed, and they're desktop units. The 628 is a roll feed, so it's an industrial type of printer on a stand, and with that, of course, you're going to probably buy a good bit larger heat press, but you can do long rolls, so you can do very long images as long as they're not more than 25 inches wide, because that's your maximum paper width. So that one has come out. It does not work with Creative Studio yet, but it will very shortly. So that one is, one that, like I say, it's new to the product lineup, but you'll see more and more of it here in the near future. Okay, here's a question for someone who has an existing Ricoh 3110, which I mentioned that the SG400 replaces, or is the new generation of, the Ricoh 3110. So this particular user has a Ricoh 3110, and as it looks like there's two parts of the question. Basically, can the ink for the 3110 load into one of the new printers? The answer is no, because the ink is not the same. It is actually a different formulation. So the 3110 ink was not formulated for the SG400 or the SG800, so it's not a compatible ink with the newer systems. Will 400 degrees melt products or scorch garments? No. When you're talking about polyester garments, their melting temperature point is higher than 400 degrees. When we're talking about items that have a polymer coating on them, again, the polymer coatings are set to much higher than 400 degrees, and they will not melt, and they shouldn't scorch. Now, I'm going to tell you, when you're dealing with garments, keep in mind that most garments were manufactured to be a garment, and we're trying to apply sublimation to that garment. So in other words, the garment manufacturers don't always play by the rules that we need. For example, when you take a garment that has color, let's say it's a yellow t-shirt, they put the color into either the fabric or the yarn, either one, to give it that yellow color, and then they heat set it. And whatever temperature they heat set it at, it maintains the color under heat. But if you heat set something at 300 degrees and then you put it in a 400-degree heat press, it's going to fade that color wherever the heat press applied to it. So we do bump into that sometimes because those are just manufacturers who had no idea anybody was ever going to sublimate their shirt, so they didn't care about the temperature. It shouldn't scorch. The only thing I've ever seen scorch is neon colors. Neon colors use brighteners, which are special additives to give it the neon look, and sometimes those brighteners will start to discolor around 300 degrees, so be aware of that. And that applies to anything, whether it's sublimation or anything with heat. Can you use templates and images from Creative Studio and other graphics programs like Coreldraw? No. The images and the templates are in Creative Studio or in Creative Studio. They don't come out and transfer. It has to do with copyrights and licensing. Okay. Now, if you create an image in Coreldraw and then save it into a standard file format and you want to upload it, you could, but you're not able to take those out and move them back and forth. Must the substrate color always be white? No. White's the best color because for one thing with sublimation, we do not have white ink. So how do we create the color white? We create it with no color. So if I had a soccer ball and I was going to put a soccer ball onto a white surface, everywhere that the soccer ball was white would be left as no color or no ink. So the surface, the white surface itself would serve as the white and it would be just fine. And because sublimation is embedded in the surface, if you rubbed your fingers across it, you wouldn't find an open gap anywhere, okay, because you can't feel sublimation since it's in the surface instead of on the surface. Now, if I put that same soccer ball on a yellow surface, then it's a yellow soccer ball. So that's where that white kind of comes into play. So white becomes the best color, and majority of sublimation blanks are made in the color white. But there are also some that are silver and gold, which can be really interesting, especially with photography. And then, of course, if you're talking about apparel, there's all kinds of colors. Sublimation will not work on darks. It won't show up. It only works on lights. What's the correct type of acrylic that can be used? You purchase an acrylic that has a polymer coating applied to the back of it. So you would go to a sublimation dealer to buy that. Okay, Luke, do you have any questions there from your audience?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, well, I'm getting all the questions done here, aren't I? Okay, no problem. Just reading off my list. Okay, well, I know that we've gone on a good bit of time there, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, from my presentation. If you don't have any questions there on your end, Luke, I appreciate being invited in today and hope that I provided some useful information. I know I put a lot of stuff out there, but it's some really good systems, and sublimation is a lot of fun, especially with Creative Studio. So hopefully it's something that will work for you, and with the choices are out there, it'll make the startup easy for you. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Luke, and thanks again for bringing me out.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for presenting us with all this information, Jimmy. Well done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot. And if you have any further questions, you can reach out to anybody at Midwest, and we can get any further questions for you answered. And, yeah, that's about it. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.